It really feels like there's been so much discussed here and in a lot of other places about Georgia's offense and the firepower coming from JT Daniels and the receivers. And the receivers are really, really good. Tight ends, now you're adding Eric Gilbert to the receiving group. This is a really stacked vertical offense. We don't talk as much anymore about the running backs. And those guys are in this game too, by the way, the passing game. And I want to talk about the running backs because this is probably the most forgotten about group, maybe on Georgia's team, but certainly on Georgia's offense. These running backs, I'm going to name all of them for you. James Cook, Zamir, Kenny McIntosh, Edwards, and Milton. That's a pretty stacked lineup. And when you start thinking about your basic, your number one back, the guy who's carried the load the bulk of the time, Zamir White, ended last season with a touchdown in every game but one and 779 yards. He had 37 yards receiving on 6 catches. James Cook, deadly all-purpose player, 303 total yards, 3 touchdowns on the ground, 225, 2 touchdowns receiving. Kenny McIntosh, 125 rushing, 111 receiving. 5 of those receptions coming in the game in the Peach Bowl, where he basically combined with JT Daniels to save the Dogs at the end. So you're looking at over 350 yards of total offense from Kenny. And then Kendall Milton, who did have a long catch against Cincinnati, but had 193 yards, 5.5 yards a carry in the run game. He's not scored a college touchdown yet, and he's going to score. So you got, Kendall Milton at 5.5 per touch, Zamir at 5.4, James at 6.7, and Kenny McIntosh at 5.3. Their worst average carrier of the ball is 5.3 yards a game. Now, Edwards I'm not going to include because it's not like he's not good. He is. He showed what he can do against Carolina and at other times during the season. But those 4 are going to be the primary people who deal with the run game at Georgia. And when you think back to the run to the Rose Bowl and the win of the conference in 17 and then even in 18 with Elijah and company, Swift and Zamir, I guess. Not that year. Anyway, my point is that Kirby has predicated his offense at the beginning of his time at Georgia on the backs. And he's had, Nick and Sony were exceptional college football running backs. Nick's going to sign a new deal here at some stage, either with the Browns or in free agency. But those guys were exceptional. We are not talking at all about the 4 guys I mentioned, the 5 scholarship running backs for Georgia, 3 of whom are top 100 players that signed with the Dogs. We're not talking about them because of the shiny new object that is the passing game. But I've talked about this a lot. Zamir is the best high school prospect I've seen play a high school game live. It was exceptional. We have never seen that Zamir. That was 2 ACL injuries ago. But what we have seen with Zamir is a workmanlike effort, consistently being good. When you look at his worst game was Mississippi State. Other than that, you got to search to find games where he didn't have 80 yards rushing. Now, he had a hard time against Cincinnati. Cincinnati was hell-bent on stopping the run. That's a good defense, too, by the way. And Zamir's not used as often in the passing game. Look at Kennel Milton. He's yet to have a game with 10 rushes. Well, he's going to this fall. Kenny McIntosh, only 1 game with 11 or more rushes. And, it adds on. James Cook is the guy that is probably, to me, a game-changing player of the bunch. Because when you look at what James can do, he's looking at around 4 or so, maybe 5 carries a game. He can really damage you. This is the only guy on the team that has had a 100-yard rushing and a 100-yard reception game. His play against Missouri, where he scored a touchdown on the ground, a touchdown in the air, that reception for a touchdown against Missouri. That I can't remember what the score was, but that ended that game. That was on a 3rd down, and he just took it like it was nothing. And people cannot guard him. It's going to be very hard to deal with. In open space, you're not tackling James Cook, okay? That's not happening. So you're going to have to get him near the line of scrimmage. And JT Daniels, the biggest thing about JT saying, hey, because he probably had dump downs in the spring game for over 100 yards. And he just said, our guys are not going to get caught and tackled in the open field. Well, yeah. So I just, James having to deal with his father's passing at the end of the season meant he did not play in the bowl game. He is always a weapon. Always. I mean, ask Alabama. Look, his performance against Alabama, over 117 yards of total offense, including that 82-yard touchdown. I mean, he caught the ball 4 times against Bama. That was a really good game for James. And he is the guy that I think is as close to Mecole Hardman's role as Georgia's got, and you got to have guys like that. But Zamir is your lead guy. His run against Auburn was exceptional, that touchdown run. He typically gets about 15 carries a game, and he's, a little shy of 80 yards a game. He really came on, I felt like, last year as the season grew longer. I mean, had 136 yards against Kentucky, had 100 against the Gators, 126 against Mizzou. He's just not a threat in the passing game the way the other guys are. And I think that's the part that's going to separate. When you look at Kenny McIntosh, he is an exceptional playmaking back in the passing game. James Cook is the best. But Kenny McIntosh is not bad at it either himself. Zamir is more of a traditional Kirby running back. 136 yards on 26 carries against Kentucky for a touchdown. I mean, his long in that game was only 22 yards. Zamir is a traditional Kirby running back. He was, as I'm telling you right now, he was as gifted as I saw in high school. But Kendall is the guy most people in the league are frightened of. And if you saw some of his runs, the run against, I think, Tennessee, where he just didn't give up, that's what people are worried about. Is that I always have felt like he was a shorter Derrick Henry, but that's hard to really compare the two because Derrick really is pretty tall. But Kendall is a physical runner who has serious speed. He could have a crazy year. I think the global point here is that when you look at this running backfield, you have a thoroughbred in Zamir and a guy who is just a workhorse. And then you have someone in James Cook who probably could be the most explosive back in the league this year because you don't know how he's going to score. He could line up in the backfield and flex out, and then suddenly he's on a backer. They're not going to be able to, and they're not going to stop him in one-on-one situations. So there are certain times in games where James Cook can get you what you need, a touchdown, whatever. And that's the part that I think Georgia's not yet unleashed. We have not seen the full potential of these 4 guys yet, including Edwards. I'll put Edwards in there too, at the number 5 running back. But he's not quite what these other 4 are yet. And, Zamir going 15 times, 10 to 15 times, 15 carries, something like that. It might be fewer this year because Kennel Milton may well come along and take snaps just because it's his time for him to do that. But this is a team. This is a group that's not talked about a lot, and I think it's a group that is, as I keep rambling on about them, they're good. They're not Sony and Nick and DeAndre Swift. They're not that 1-2-3 punch, but they are a really good group. They're probably closer to the 18 group with Elijah and Swift and that group, but. This is a good, Brian Herring, this is a good group of guys, and they are not talked about a lot. I don't think we're going to see Georgia with 300-yard rushing games, but I do think that they have the capability to do that with these guys. These guys are much more explosive in a way that it's hard to say that DeAndre Swift and Sony Michel were not explosive. These guys are lighter, quicker, even they're lighter, but the explosion, you're not going to grind people down with one of these guys like you could with Nick. It's a more diverse group. They can do more things. Now time for your Stuckey's Scoop. Our friends at Stuckey's have really helped us out this summer delivering these videos to y'all. I can't say enough about, if you are a business owner and you're selling retail, I would get this Stuckey pecan log rolls in your store. They have a variety of products. It sells Americana. It's their great road trip. Everybody's getting back out there. You're going to want to connect with that. You're going to want that in your store. It will sell. It will make you revenue. Here's the Stuckey's Scoop for the week, or for the day. Dion Bowie is a five-star player who's committed to the Dogs. And in today's Stuckey's Scoop, we've got a quote for you from, or what we were hearing this past week. Dean Legge, Matt DeBerry, Matt did a good job getting this in. An insider telling us that Dion Bowie is going to circle back around. In other words, take another hard look at Georgia. His recruitment is not over, but I think everybody's got to realize that we've been in a pandemic and we're still in one, and we're coming out of it. Well, these young men have not had a chance to see everything, and Texas A&M has done a really good job lately, but Alabama's going to do a good job. Ohio State. This is a competitive marketplace, and Georgia's going to have to resell Dion on coming to play for Georgia. He's from where Kirby grew up in Bainbridge. There's a long way to go. We got another 5-ish months left, and we have a whole season. But he is a really good player, and it would be a shame for Georgia to lose out on him. But our Stuckey Scoop for the day, he's going to circle back around. You can take that for however you'd like. Let's talk about it more over on dogpost, DAWGPOST.com. Thanks for listening and watching. We'll see you on the website.